I leaned against the tinted window of the commuter train as dawn peeled open above the Hudson, soaking the river in bruised orange. Every weekday for 15 years, the same rails carried me from a rent-controlled apartment in Hoboken to the chrome canyons of Midtown, and most mornings I felt quietly lucky. I was 45, healthy enough to jog 3 miles without wheezing, solvent enough to buy concert tickets without counting pennies, and curious enough to argue Baudelaire with baristas who spelled my name, Elliot. Commuting had always been my private ritual. I boarded the 612 from Hoboken Terminal, third car from the front, left side seat to catch the sunrise. I knew every bridge girder and graffiti tag along those tracks. I carried a leather-bound notebook where I scribbled questions no one at Delacorte ever asked. Why do we equate complexity with value? How many lifetimes hide inside a single Monday? What would the circuit diagram of loneliness look like? The notebook calmed me the way Monk's smooth prayer beats. During winter delays, I offered my seat to pregnant strangers and swapped crossword clues with conductors. The small economies of kindness mattered, though they never made quarterly reports. By the time the train eased beneath the skyline, the city already sounded like a hard drive spinning up, ready to devour and archive. I would enter the lobby with its marble veins and high-end espresso bar, nod to security guards who memorized my usual roast, and ride the elevator to the 20th floor where ambitions hung on walls like framed patents. I carried no wedding ring, no slack-jawed brood demanding soccer practices or tuition plans. That fact registered most days only when silence greeted me at night, yet in the office it pinned me to a stereotype, the diligent bachelor who volunteered for holiday shifts because he had nothing better to do. I didn't mind the tease. Work filled a spacious corner inside me, and I decorated it with orderly timelines and elegant spreadsheets. Someone had to keep the wires untangled while middle managers chased buzzwords like fireflies. On Monday, March 3rd, a date now tattooed on the soft tissue beneath memory skin, I arrived to find my keycard access revoked. The receptionist, cheeks flaming, whispered that Mr. Rivers wanted to see me immediately. Jackson Rivers had been installed as COO 6 months earlier, a Harvard case study in loafers, expensive, clever, and impatient with anything that could not be screamed into a KPI. His glass office overlooked the bullpen like a lighthouse designed by Freud. I stepped inside. He did not invite me to sit. He orbited his standing desk like a planet convinced of its own gravity. He thumbed through my personnel file as though searching for expired coupons, then exhaled a cynical laugh. Elliot Parker, he began, savoring the cadence. 45, never married, no kids. You take the late train, you eat alone, and you bring soup in mason jars. People chuckle, you know. They call you Uncle Spreadsheet. We're trimming dead weight, and culture fit matters. He slid a plain white envelope across the desk. I'm sure you'll land on your feet, but not here. The moment should have detonated an artery. Instead, serenity wrapped around me like a borrowed coat. I extended my hand. For a beat too long he hesitated, then grasped it, startled by the steadiness of my grip. Thank you for the clarity, Jackson, I said, and meant it. Truth, even when barbed, is antiseptic. He blinked, uncertain whether I was mocking him. The fluorescent lights above rendered his immaculate hair helmet slightly green. I walked the plank back to my cubicle. The bullpen buzzed with voyeuristic insects pretending to be coworkers. Brian from accounting mouthed a sympathetic, sorry, but the glow of gossip in his eyes stole the sincerity. I powered down my workstation, slipped a thumb drive of personal scripts into my jacket, and filled a single banker's box with ordinary relics, a ceramic Red Sox mug, a desktop bonsai, conference lanyards, and the origami crane that Sarah in HR made after her mother's surgery. When the elevator swallowed me, I felt oddly lighter. Someone had unlaced the corset of expectation and let my ribs expand. Jackson's office decor looked ripped from a venture capitalist Pinterest board, geometric terrariums, motivational canvases screaming hustle harder, and an antique typewriter he probably never touched. He gestured for me to sit but didn't wait for compliance. Instead, he recited engagement metrics, turnover ratios, and something called social coherence score measured by AI scraping internal chats. According to the algorithm, my empathy quotient was high, but my virality potential low. Translation: good for morale, bad for a TikTok-driven brand. He feigned reluctance, sighing as though moral gravity forced his hand. He highlighted my failure to attend the last 2 team-building paintball outings, my preference for solo lunches on the Riverwalk, my refusal to join mandatory Fun Friday karaoke. Each bullet point was delivered like scripture. The absurdity sparkled. Getting fired for misalignment with laser tag felt surreal. I almost laughed. But I let him finish, let him believe authority held weight greater than weather. After signing a severance document printed on deceptively thick cardstock, I stepped into a windy March afternoon and inhaled freedom so sharp it stung. The first 48 hours of unemployment tasted oddly like summer break. I woke without alarms, brewed coffee that didn't scorch the tongue, and listened to Coltrane's Blue Train spin through dust motes in the kitchen light. In the afternoons, I wandered the city, noting how many small businesses survived on handshakes and hope. I finished East of Eden, underlining sentences Steinbeck must have forged from the same alloy as prophecy, and now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. By the third evening, the edges of panic began to glow. But panic can be a flashlight if you angle it right. I opened LinkedIn, the world's largest cocktail party without cocktails, and toggled my status to open to work. The algorithm, that blindfolded auctioneer, flung my resume into thousands of feeds. At 10:17 p.m., a message popped. Elliot, long time. Need a fire tamer. Interested. It came from Marcus Hale, college roommate turned venture capitalist. Marcus collected problems the way grandmothers collect porcelain frogs, joyfully, obsessively. His latest acquisition, Phoenix Dynamics, manufactured next-gen medical implants but was hemorrhaging cash. I didn't respond immediately. I slept on the idea, not because I doubted my ability, but because silence is a tuning fork. It rings the hidden note beneath decisions. At dawn, I typed 4 words. Let's talk. Coffee first. By evening, I was on a video call with a 7-member board radiating equal parts fatigue and desperation. I outlined a 90-day stabilization plan, drew parallels between imaging hardware pipelines and Phoenix's additive manufacturing flow, and asked for decisive authority if appointed. They offered travel arrangements. I asked for open books. Unemployment reorganized the calendar into strange geometries. Hours bent, afternoons stretched, and evenings arrived unannounced like acquaintances bearing casseroles. I cataloged flavors of quiet, the hush after dishwasher clicks, the deeper silence between saxophone riffs, the brittle stillness of 3 a.m. when the city holds its breath. I relearned cooking, not as perfunctory refueling but as ceremony, caramelizing onions slow enough to dissolve regret, simmering tomato bisque until apartment walls smelled like August in Tuscany. I visited the New York Public Library and thumbed through archival issues of Popular Mechanics from the 1950s, marveling at optimism dense enough to bend light. One article predicted backyard nuclear reactors by 1967. Another advised homeowners to choose aluminum furniture because it would outlast wooden trends. I took notes, drawing parallels between those mid-century visions and the additive manufactured ligaments Phoenix hoped to sell surgeons. Technology, I realized, keeps chasing the same dream to gift the body back to itself. On Thursday, I attended a Midtown meetup titled Fail Fast Founders. The room buzzed with hoodie-clad 20-somethings pitching vaporware between swigs of cold brew. I felt Jurassic yet oddly invisible, which is a form of freedom. A lanky coder asked what my startup did. I said we built doorways, not doors, and he nodded as though I spouted Zen. Failure had become a brand. I wondered whether any of them had tasted the non-theoretical version, the kind that comes with Cobra paperwork and a landlord's grim smile. Marcus proposed flying me to Chicago first class, but I opted for a quiet Amtrak sleeper instead. Trains stretch time in useful ways. They carve corridors for thought. I watched Pennsylvania steel towns blur into watercolor, imagined the factory Phoenix had bought, pictured floor plans, ways to reroute material flow, how to turn abandoned loading docks into testing bays. In the dining car, I shared a booth with a retired firefighter who told me heroism is mostly paperwork nobody sees. His words lodged inside me like a pilot light. By the time the Sears Tower pierced the horizon, my plan had matured into a lattice of objectives. Restore morale by granting engineers Friday afternoons for skunkworks projects. Implement Kanban boards visible to every employee. Renegotiate bulk memory chip contracts before Q3 spot prices spiked. I arrived at Union Station under a dome of stained glass and felt a pulse of conviction stronger than caffeine. Phoenix Dynamics occupied a converted piano factory along the Chicago River where exposed brick met humming clean rooms. The lobby smelled like soldered circuitry and fresh paint, a startup cologne. On my first morning, I convened the senior engineers in a drafty conference space still bearing ghost outlines of velvet drapes. I spoke their dialect, throughput bottlenecks, calibration drift, thermal fatigue. Eyes widened, heads nodded. By Friday, we realigned the product roadmap, scrapping vanity features in favor of manufacturable miracles. One of my first acts as interim COO, before the board elevated my title, was to abolish the open office layout that made introverts flinch. We converted and used marketing cubicles into quiet pods, installed sign-up sheets, and within a week productivity metrics climbed 4%. I walked the floor daily, not with spreadsheets, but with questions. What do you need? What's in your way? The answers filled yellow legal pads whose edges frayed like ancient maps. We fixed a misaligned pick-in-place machine that had spit capacitors across the floor for months, recalibrated thermal ovens, and replaced the vending machine stocked with sugar bombs with one offering actual food. We adopted failure budgets, allowing teams to experiment so long as they logged lessons learned. The policy saved us from repeating mistakes and, paradoxically, reduced actual failures. At the first all-hands, I unfolded Sarah's origami crane and told its story. I said, "A delicate thing can survive transit if folded exactly right." The metaphor wasn't subtle, but neither is hope. The next weeks blurred into kinetic montage. We negotiated a strategic materials agreement with a titanium recycler in Pittsburgh, slashed prototype iteration cycles from 21 days to 9, and launched an internal portal that translated tech jargon into investor-friendly narratives. Rumor of our momentum ricocheted through trade journals. VentureWire dubbed us the quiet juggernaut. My calendar became a mosaic of 7 a.m. stand-ups and midnight Zooms with suppliers in Osaka. I slept 4 hours a night and woke charged. We launched a Tuesday tradition called Technical Debt Amnesty. Engineers could surface one piece of kludgy legacy code or hardware kluga without fear of blame. Teams would swarm to refactor or redesign it within a 48-hour sprint. The first amnesty liberated 83 kilolines of spaghetti firmware that had haunted QA for 2 years. Applause echoed across Slack channels. Fernanda Ruiz, a firmware engineer who hid behind oversized headphones, later told me she almost quit before that day, but stayed because the building's heartbeat finally matched her own. We also rewrote the employee handbook in plain language, jettisoning the legalese labyrinth. The new version opened with a haiku penned by Dr. Ortiz. Hold material/shape hope inside the lattice/lift the fragile sky. HR worried it was unorthodox. I argued orthodoxy never put humans on the moon. Eventually they agreed, poetry stays. One afternoon, while reviewing design tolerances for spinal fusion cages, my assistant buzzed. "A Jackson Rivers is online too. Says it's urgent." I let the call ring long enough to finish annotating a stress test graph. When I picked up, his tone dripped manufactured warmth. Delacorte's Q2 numbers were hemorrhaging. A core imaging sensor had failed FDA audit, and supply chain snarls doubled costs. Jackson framed his plea as a partnership opportunity. Beneath the buzzwords curled desperation. He needed a lifeboat. I listened, pen hovering over a blank sticky note. "Elliot, we could really use your leadership. Come back as VP Engineering. Name your package." People hear Mr. Steady Hand. Memory offered me the vision of his smirk, the envelope, the humiliation disguised as performance culture. I spoke gently, almost tender. "Jackson, I'm honored you'd reach out. Truly. But I found a place where people don't laugh behind backs, they build in front of them. Culture fit matters, remember?" Silence expanded until the handset seemed to vibrate. I wished him luck and hung up. The origami crane watched from my shelf, wings patient as algebra. Weeks after my curt phone call with Jackson, Delacorte stock dipped on rumors of class action exposure related to sensor calibration errors. Business press hounds called me for comment, hoping I'd dish revenge. I offered none. Instead, I spoke about Phoenix's upcoming beta trials in orthopedic clinics, about the quiet genius of our lead materials scientist, Dr. Lena Ortiz, who 3D prints titanium meshes flexible enough to wrap a hummingbird's heart. Interviews ran under headlines like "Steady Hands at Phoenix." During quarterly earnings, analysts asked how we managed 8 consecutive sprints without schedule slippage. I credited the janitorial staff. That raised eyebrows, so I explained. They agreed to adjust cleaning windows, allowing thermal tests to run uninterrupted. Innovation isn't always code. Sometimes it's a mop schedule. The remark trended on tech Twitter. When our NASA memorandum became official, we staged a live-streamed tour of the facility. Viewers watched robotic arms weave alloy strands into honeycomb panels destined for lunar habitats. Comments scrolled faster than oxygen. Among the usernames I spotted JRivers 1958. Whether it was really him or a prank, I'll never know. Yet the idea of Jackson watching, somewhere, maybe in a half-lit office dwarfed by empty desks, injected a quiet symmetry into the event. Not schadenfreude closure. 3 months later, the Tech Manufacturing Summit convened at the Javits Center in New York. It felt poetic to return to my old stomping grounds as keynote speaker. The hall smelled of ozone and ambition. I walked the show floor incognito, badge flipped, absorbing booth chatter. Near the autonomous robotics pavilion, I nearly collided with Jackson. He looked older, edges sanded down by insomnia. For a split second, we were 2 commuters again, strangers sharing silence on a platform. Recognition flickered, then the practiced smile faltered. He muttered apologies like loose change. Finally, he asked if Phoenix might consider acquiring Delacorte's imaging division, dangling a bargain. Pride leaked from him like coolant. I promised to relay the offer to our M and to council, though we both knew our roadmap no longer required what Delacorte built. Before we parted, he said, "How did you?" Then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. I answered anyway. I listened, I said. Not to the noise, to the signal. News of our encounter circulated, embellished, mimified. A junior reporter framed it as revenge served at 60 frames per second in 8K. But revenge implies malice, and malice burns calories better spent on invention. My calendar that week included more pressing tasks: finalize a green energy retrofit for the factory, approve parental leave extensions, and mentor a 19-year-old intern who designed a shock absorber from recycled fishing nets. The intern reminded me of me, awkward, intense, unwilling to abandon big questions. Somewhere in that reflection, time folded. Fiscal year closed with Phoenix posting record gains: 38% revenue growth, 51% expansion in contracted backlog, and a signed memorandum of understanding with NASA for lunar habitat components. Marcus organized a rooftop celebration atop the factory. The Chicago skyline glittered like scattered sequins, Lake Michigan a dark stanza beyond. He handed me a glass of bourbon older than some of our interns, raised his own, and said, "To second acts." I leaned on the railing, wind combing my hair, and replayed the arcs that had ferried me here: the lonesome commuter trains, the fluorescent corridors, the handshake delivered like a verdict. I considered emailing Jackson a thank you note, perhaps enclosing a Phoenix Press kit, but spite is a poor tenant in a house newly built. Instead, I opened the Delacorte folder on my phone and deleted it. Failure, I realized, is less a tombstone and more a trapdoor. Swing through, land elsewhere, start dancing before the dust notices. The world enjoys calling people losers. The world, after all, is addicted to premature endings. But stories keep writing themselves inside us long after the audience files out. On the anniversary of my firing, I rose before dawn and boarded the same 6:12 train, this time riding it in reverse, from Chicago's Union Station eastward, destination less clear than intention. I carried no briefcase, only the notebook and the crane. I wanted to see the Hudson again, to test whether the river's mirror still reflected the man I had been. In the club car, I sipped black coffee and wrote one line across a fresh page. A closed door is only a question mark tilted vertical. The sentence felt like a passport stamp. The train rolled into Penn Station near midnight. I could have hailed a taxi to a boutique hotel, but impulse dragged me outside, into February wind, toward Delacorte's tower. Security recognized me and waved me through. Apparently, my face still glowed in the employee database, ghost credentials. The lobby was largely dark, except for a cleaning crew polishing marble. I walked past the elevator banks to the glass wall overlooking the river. City lights jittered on the water. I thought about time, how it is both blade and balm, and forgave the building for echoing laughter that once bruised me. The next morning I flew home. At Phoenix, the team surprised me with a prototype implant engraved with the crane symbol. It wasn't functional. Titanium doves rarely are, but the gesture nested somewhere deep. We displayed it in the foyer beside success metrics and plant-filled terrariums. Visitors asked what it meant. I said it was the shape of resilience. Sometimes reporters still ask for the story in its punchline version. Fired on Friday, CEO by next Friday, ex-boss begs for mercy. They crave the Hollywood arc, symmetrical and sharp. I usually give them the longer version, about the weeks spent talking to janitors, the train rides, the firefighter's wisdom, the mistakes cataloged on yellow pads. My telling is slower, but it leaves room for silence, and inside silence grows context, fertile ground for whatever listener might plant next. If a moral exists, it's not revenge or hustle porn. It's that dignity scales. Strip everything: title, salary, marital status. And what remains is how you treat strangers when nobody tweets about it. Culture fit, it turns out, is less about karaoke and more about shared latitude for being human. At 45, I remain unmarried, still bring soup in mason jars, and still ride trains preferentially over planes when time permits. Success did not sand away oddness, it licensed it. I keep the envelope Jackson slid across his desk, framed behind my office door. Guests mistake it for an award. I let them. Awards are simply stories folded into metal. Envelopes are stories waiting to be written. I often think about the definition of luck. Some call it luck. Whatever it is, The night I locked the factory doors and stepped onto the sidewalk, Lake Michigan exhaled a cold breath, and for one heartbeat, I felt the planetary gears align, silent and vast. The universe didn't owe me a thing, yet it had given me a stage. All it asked in return was that I keep moving the plot forward.